Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real. And we are getting real today, Nicole. We just met about 10 minutes ago, but we both have a friend in common who we trust implicitly. And so the fact that this friend, Phil, connected the two of us, we started chatting just to kind of get to know each other. And then I said, no, wait, we just got to go live with this because this is a super great conversation. So Nicole, welcome to Circle Up and Get Real.
Thank you so much, Jody. I'm super excited to be here.
I know. So you are currently in Maryland.
I am.
In your van outside of
Yes.
McDonald's because it has good Wi-Fi.
Yes. Starbucks is a little bit of a failure in this area. So yeah, the Wi-Fi at McDonald's is solid.
I love it.
Knock on wood.
Right?
Knock on wood.
We'll see how it goes through this.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's what's been really fun about this podcast, because there have been times where somebody's phone has rung in the middle of the podcast and I leave it in because that's what it means to be real. And I love that. For one thing, it means I don't have to be so good at editing and I don't have to get so perfectionistic about things because that's kind of the whole platform we're on here. So I love the conversation we started to have. And I stopped you and said, wait, we just need to record this. And so Nicole, I have on my little piece of paper right here that you are a personal and business growth advisor and that you are here to elevate consciousness and eradicate poverty, among many other things.
Yeah, that's the core. That's my purpose.
And you do that in a lot of ways.
I do, and I always have. I think that who we are transcends what we do. And so throughout life, when you look at young children, you see them beaming with who they are. It's the conditions of our environments over time that quiets our beingness and puts us more into the doingness mode. And so as we age and as we question, who am I and what matters, we either go towards that which we are or we fight against it, and it manifests in all different ways. And at the end of life, we always go back to peace. We always go back to harmony, and that's how we come into the world. And life is just such a wild adventure. And so, yeah, I've done lots of different things, experienced all sorts of different environments. And at the end of the day, what I came to know is that who I am is someone who is here for peace. I love unconditionally. I accept unconditionally, and I move through unconditionally.
Love that. You said you've been doing this for a very long time. And so let's go back to the beginning. Is this your hometown? Is this your home state, Maryland?
It is it is where I grew up. I was born in Toronto to American parents, and I currently actually domicile not far from you out of South Dakota because South Dakota has a wild program that allows Americans to get residency in the state and become full-time travelers. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for educating me on my own. We call it the lower Dakota. That's
the lower one, yeah.
Right. Yeah. In North Dakota. We're friendly rivals, North and South Dakota. Where in South Dakota? Like where?
Sioux Falls.
Sioux Falls. Great. Yeah. I will be there in a couple weeks. So
it's fabulous. Yeah. I love the Dakotas and Montana and Wyoming. It's just such a beautiful country out there.
It is. And a lot of people don't see it because especially North Dakota, we're kind of a fly over, travel through state. Not a lot of reason to stop, but that doesn't mean people couldn't do that. And we'll talk about that at some point in this conversation. So tell me about you. How have you always been this free spirit that you occur to me to be now?
Definitely. That's something that is very common. People refer to me as a free spirit. I've always been very grounded as well, though. It's fun because I have a lot of the analytical in my mind. I love systems and processes, and I understand things that tend to be more scientific and mathematical, and people with those left brain side, I think that's what they call them, left brain. Then I'm also the creative and the artist and the philosopher. And so, yeah, I'm an old soul, they also say, and I definitely resonate with that as well.
Right. So in your career, you have done a lot of things. I mean, when you said, "Yep, I've been this and this," a
Yeah.
correctional officer, and I'm like, "Wait a second, we gotta go back here." So, did you always? You mentioned earlier about little kids knowing what they want to be, and
Who they
being
are.
that, yeah, who they are. If they don't ask, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" They say, "Who do you want to be when you grow up?" And I think from an early age, like you said, if we watch little kids, they do know who they are.
Mhm.
And then something happens. I've heard it said that we de-genius our children at some point, and it doesn't sound like that part of you left.
No, it didn't. And you know, I believe that everyone comes in to the world with purpose. So when we come into form, we have a divine purpose. We have God-given talents that are inexplicable, right? Skills we can learn,
Mm.
but there's something innate in each of us that's just granted. And I believe that the journey of life is the actualization of that. And some people are more interested in knowing themselves, and some people are less, and all is well,
Mhm.
right? And so, yeah, I was very blessed to have parents that did not invest a lot into me as their child. And so I enjoyed moving through a lot of adversity throughout my life so that I could experience what I needed to experience to be able to I to be able to, oh, what's the word? Not resonate, but because resonance is a little bit different, but identify. So I've been very fortunate to have held the space for people in their darkest days, and I recognize now that that's really, it doesn't matter what the person is going through. It doesn't matter who the person is or what their background is. Everyone has dark days. Everyone has fears. Everyone has nightmares. And I'm very comfortable in that space of understanding why people do what they do. I'm very comfortable holding space through fear and through chaos. And that's been my greatest gift, I think.
Did you know that when you were in it? You said you used language that was very specific to saying, "I was blessed with parents who didn't invest in me as their child." That's very unusual language for most
Mm-hmm.
people. Did you know the value and benefit of the way you were raised when you were in it?
Absolutely not the hindsight, right? But
Right.
I never, so a lot of times people ask, why me? I never asked why me. A lot of times people say this isn't fair. I never said this isn't fair. And as I went through life and tried on those beliefs, they never felt they never served me. They never suited me. And so I just moved through things very quickly. That's not to say I didn't go through a lot of pain and a lot of heartache and all of the things. We're all feeling beings. And we all, what people don't understand is that we all feel the same feelings. Love is love, fear is fear, pain is pain. And it doesn't work to believe that your pain is any greater than somebody else's, or that your experience, like a lot of times people would say, oh, well, my struggles aren't as bad as this person's struggles, or people try and justify things. And I believe that that justification isn't serving anyone, because when we say, well, you're in a worse situation than I am, or I'm in a worse situation than you, whatever, you're just in a situation. So as long as you judge the situation, you detach yourself from the situation. It's by being in the situation and experiencing the situation and solving through the situation that you transcend the situation.
Mm.
And then from that perspective, transcendence, you can understand how the situation happened so that you don't put yourself back into a situation like that
Yeah.
in the future.
That sounds like a really evolved understanding of things. And so you said you were born into this. I mean, you are an old soul. Some of this just was second nature to you, it sounds like. It wasn't like you had to learn it. Would
No,
you?
I had to learn everything.
Okay.
When I say
Okay.
I was an old soul, that's more to say, some people come in and they're wise beyond their years. They get things faster. And that's what I think this old soul idea is, that when we return to non-physical, everything is at peace. Everything is complete. Our time on earth, we were talking before recording about Wayne Dyer, and he's been instrumental in both of our, lives and in our educations. And so I've just had so many opportunities. I have chosen so many opportunities throughout my life to really connect with people deeply who have lived before me, right? So when I lived in Germany, for example, I was very fortunate to have an apartment in a building where there was an older gentleman who I got to know, and he was an SS soldier that had been captured by the Americans. And I also had a gentleman in the building who was an SS soldier that had been captured by the Russians. And as I was there and I was touring, I went to Dachau and Auschwitz, and I really studied the Holocaust. And, I was at the Anne Frank Museum, and I studied her long, long before. And so getting to know these two men and spending time with them one-on-one and listening to their stories of life and towards the end of their life was extremely meaningful, because people will place judgments based on their beliefs about stories that have been told, not really understanding how people have to make decisions moment to moment as we live, and Herr Schönig, the gentleman that was captured by the Russians, when I first came across him, he was very scary to me. Very, very tall man. I think he was probably about 6'4", big man. He was bald with a little bit of white hair and glasses, and just always looked unhappy. And as time went on, I got to know him, and he had been an English professor a long time before, and he had only one arm. And anyways, he was scary to me when I first met him, but then I got to know him, and I was very fortunate when he wound up going into I don't know if it was nursing care or just the hospital, but I would visit him. And one day I went and he was gone. And so it was really such a nice experience to no longer have fear about that which I believed stories about, but I didn't necessarily understand. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but I always gravitated as a young child towards people who were much, much, much older than me and much wiser than me. And I really valued listening to them and spending time in communication with them, and then also with children. And so throughout my life, I have sought to remove judgments, because anytime I've recognized, oh, I was judgy there, I realize that's when I judge, I am missing the opportunity to actually connect and understand.
Yeah. So I wonder if the question that keeps popping into my mind is, do people have to experience you said, I was afraid of him, he was a big man, the fear that comes up for us, which in some cases stays with people for a long time. You've allowed yourself to learn to let it go, and you've become really aware of that. Do we need to hit those places where the crisis points happen for us to actually learn and work through things, do you think? Or do you know?
I do. And Jody, thank you for that, because that's an excellent question. And that's the question people don't want to ask. They don't want to. People are constantly looking to hack things, right? They're constantly looking for the easy way out. And what I've come to know in my life is that until you confront every fear that you have, you cannot transcend it. Mm-hmm. So it's about understanding, okay, I'm in a situation, I feel fear. You've got to feel the feelings, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens is people go, I feel fear, I fear fear, I'm going to scream against fear, I'm going to fight against fear, I'm going to resist fear, and I am going to do everything I can to push fear away. We're fear-based. We are human beings, meaning we're feeling beings. Mm-hmm. So everything that comes up for us is an opportunity to confront that which is inside of us. Mm-hmm. And so as we hide from the fear, and as we push the fear down, and we say, I'm going to fake it till I make it, God's going to give you something else that's going to move you through whatever it is you fear, right?
Mm.
And so, no, everybody doesn't have to go through all of their fears if self-actualization is not their intended
Oh,
outcome, right?
yeah.
But for me, self-actualization is what I came into the world to do. And so I did that. And I did that by examining everything that I felt, every judgment I've made, every fear that I've had, and looking at each opportunity as just that, an opportunity. People like to live in the world of problems. I don't see problems, I see
Mm.
challenges.
Mm.
When I did corporate training decades ago, we often used the SWOT analysis. And so with that, that's a framework that I've looked at everything in my life through, that presents itself as something that's like insurmountable, because I
Mm.
know nothing's insurmountable. I know in my lived experience that there is nothing insurmountable. And so when I would come into a situation that would seem problematic or bring up a lot of fear, I would look at what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats. And once you're aware of those things, then you can make intelligent decisions. You can go, okay, well, this is a threat, so I'm not gonna walk into that. Here's an opportunity. How can I leverage that which I already have acquired to perhaps, alleviate the threat, stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about another platform called the SOAR Appreciative Inquiry. Have you heard of that?
It sounds familiar, but please.
So appreciative inquiry only focuses on the positive. SOAR would take SWOT and remove two elements and call it strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't focus on the weaknesses and the threats. Your point earlier was if we're shoving that away and not addressing it, it's still there. We're just
Yes.
kind of putting something over the top of what's really there. So I hadn't thought of that in that way before. I'd thought, hey, we should just focus on the positive. But if we're doing it at the denial of the truth and reality, then it's really not serving us anyway.
Exactly. It's putting lipstick on pigs, I like to
Yeah,
say.
right.
And the thing is that appreciation is the key, because as we appreciate, meaning that as we externally appreciate that which is in front of us, we appreciate in terms of our value increasing.
Oh,
And language is super important, and most people don't understand English. They're using English every day, but Latin. When I was growing up, I think I was in 10th grade when that was the last year they offered Latin. I lived in Germany. I learned about German. So English is a new language, right? And it's the wordiest language, and people are constantly putting new terms in the dictionary, but people don't understand where the language came from. And until you understand the code that's been used since the beginning of civilization, all the different languages, verbal and nonverbal, colors mean things. It's like I was driving down the highway today and there was this guy zipping through traffic. If you don't put your blinker on to let somebody know what you're about to do, you are running the risk of causing a major ripple effect and killing people. So
right.
it's really, really important that we understand what we're saying when we're saying it. And people are so busy hurrying and rushing through because they don't want to feel the adversity, that they want to ignore it. That denial is what creates chaos.
Yeah, that's so important. I hope everybody heard that because that, if you've heard this podcast at all, I am an English major. And so I love language and I love the origin of words. And I was kind of that geeky, nerdy person in college who was like, bring it on, I want to know more. So I love that you said that. I love that connection. I want to know a little bit more about you. You mentioned earlier that you were a correctional officer. What was your aspiration when you were going in high school and going on? What did you want to do? You didn't know?
So aspirations are a funny thing. I never really attached to very much because my circumstances dictated my reality. And so I didn't grow up in a safe home. And so I wound up leaving home at 16. I was emancipated and I was living on my own. I was working full time and I was going to high school in a pretty unsafe place. And I had a teacher for drama and for English, and her name was Shelley Yablon, and she was lovely. She was 23, just out of Syracuse University. And this school that I went to, it was near DC. It was very inner city. It was very, if you ever saw Dangerous Minds back in the 90s, I think that was, yeah, I think that was it. Dangerous Minds or Higher Learning. I think Higher Learning was the university, and dangerous, but it was like that. It was a very dangerous place. And anyways, she was getting picked on by some of the students one day, and I spoke up for her. She wound up sitting down at her desk and crying, and I spoke up for her, and that put me on the hit list. And so I wound up being threatened and shoved in school. And then one day I was walking down the street on a weekend nearby where I lived, and I felt this person come up and put a gun in my back, and then he came around and put it to my forehead and told me that if I ever disrespected him again, he was Curtis was his name, he was one of the students, he was the one picking on her, and he said he would kill me. And I was 16, I was in 11th grade, and I thought, school's really not that important to me. And so I wound up dropping out. And yeah, so everything, I've always lived very moment to moment, very present moment. And so I don't get too caught up on, ooh, I want to be this or I want to do that. I've done everything I've ever wanted to do. And so the way I wound up being a correctional officer was I was already working in youth justice, and I was not liking the terms. I was not liking the environment. I felt that things that were happening where I was they were things that I would speak up against, but you can't fight City Hall kind of thing, right? So, and trust me, I've tried. And so you got to know when your voice is resonating and when it's not. And so for me, I recognized that by staying in the environment that I was in this particular facility, I wasn't contributing to progress. I was just staying in a space that wasn't serving. And so I had to make the decision, what do I do for me? Because I can't change the system from being in the system that is dysfunctional. I'm not willing to lose myself for that. And I already had felt like I couldn't be my truest version of self. And so there was an opportunity to transfer into the adult system, and I asked for advice from people that I trusted and took it into account. And I was like, okay, this is the best thing for me right now. So I transferred into the adult system, and there I worked in 2 different facilities, and I had experiences that opened my eyes, and I wouldn't have known the things that I got to learn. And once that served me, and I realized this is not where I want to be, it was time to go.
Yeah. What does a correctional officer do? Like, are you the one making sure everybody follows the rules? Or
yeah, I mean, in essence, a correctional officer is meant to ensure health, safety, and welfare of the incarcerated individuals. What they do may be something different,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's the thing, is I saw a lot of things inside that I felt were out of integrity, and there was only so much I could do. And once I got to the point of realizing there's nothing more I can do to affect change, it was time for me to move on, because God let me know it was time for me to move on by giving me a lot of illness. And so I just realized that I can either stay in the environment that I was in and continue being ill, or I could move on from the environment I was in and take a chance on anything else. And so that I decided to go back into coaching, which I had done a long time before that. And I thought, well, I'm going to just start my coaching practice over, because I got to work with happy people. I got to work with well people who are actively choosing life, rather than being contained in this environment that's just not.
Yeah, yeah. So did your illnesses, were they a result of the environment you were in? Could you say that?
Sure. I mean, I believe that they were. I believe that they are. I believe all dis-ease and discord and disharmony is all, at the highest level, it's all spiritual. We have physical manifestations. So I was struggling with What I wound up getting a diagnosis and a treatment for was lupus, but at the time it was just dis-ease. And so dis-ease was reflective in my body for the dis-ease that was occurring in my heart and in my mind and in my environment. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but
No, it does.
Everybody has different perspectives, but
Yeah.
I believe that all disease is information,
Right.
and so it doesn't make it easier per se to go through the pain, but that perspective has served me well, understanding that this too shall pass one way or another. Right before we hopped on, I told you I've just recently overcome terminal prognosis, and during the time where I was living it, it's difficult to explain. So internally, I didn't believe that I was going to die, but all symptoms pointed to death. And so I just wrote it out. I detached. I did everything I needed to come to a place of peace and to be ready to go, and surrendered. And in that surrender, the miracles occurred. The angels, on earth showed up, and everything was provided for me. So it's a difficult, it's a challenge to walk through life, right? The human experience is so complex, and everybody is always making their own way. And this is one thing I've learned, no matter what choice we make, it's the right one. It's okay. And people are, excuse me, people are very hard on themselves and very hard on others. But at the end of the day, every breath we take is a new life. We are reborn every time we wake up in the morning, every time we breathe. As long as we're physically on earth, it's never too late to make a new decision. And when our time on earth is over, well, it's over, and we are back to non-physical. And so in non-physical, all is well. I mean, God, universe, source, whatever you want to call it, it's omnipotent. I mean, it's everywhere. You can't contain the air, right? Like, it's the water, the air, it is uncountable, like, if we're going to go to English, right? And so spirit is everywhere, and we can see evidence of whatever we're focusing on if we're open to that and we're attuned to that. People who believe they live in an unfriendly universe will find proof of that everywhere. And people who believe they live in a friendly universe will find proof of that everywhere. And it really is, we are constantly living, as we walk the earth, we are constantly living in every possible reality, but for our choices, but for our awareness. And so people feel tied down, and they feel like they're oppressed, and that's their choice, whether they recognize it or not. So when you zoom out to a broader perspective and you say, how did I get here? And you go through all of the things, all of the occurrences that got you to today, it's pretty fascinating, because once you understand how you got to today, you understand you can go anywhere that you want tomorrow.
And that, to me, feels like a universal truth, whether or not people want to believe it. The truth doesn't cease being true just because people don't believe it.
Yeah, and the want is the gap. So people want to believe a lot of things. People want a lot of things, but whether or not they're willing to, that's where the fear comes in, right? That's where people get held down by their own beliefs, because it's releasing your attachment to that which that keeps you comfortable, that keeps you safe, and saying, I'm going to surrender anyhow. And when we hear about miracles of, parents lifting cars off of children, and, women that having, somebody break into their home and hold them at gunpoint and rape them, and, or not, and walk away, right? Nothing has ever been decided. It's always in the moment. When you're interacting with another human being, they're on their own trajectory, but we all come from source. we all come from the same universal intelligence, or God, or whatever you want to call it. And so innately, humans are good. We are good. We are God, right? As Wayne used to say, there's only one difference. There's just the O. Nothing's different between good and God. And so when you feel good, you feel God. Nobody wants to harm another person. Hurt people hurt people. And so as someone is in their demons, or in their fear, in their hate, in their rage, it is not that they are going to destroy that which is in their path. There is always another component. There's always the third component, right? I don't know if that makes any sense, or that's just too deep. I a lot of times people tell me I'm too deep for them.
No. But that's what this conversation is about. That's what this show is all about. So I have a couple of questions. And one is, how do you think, first I'll back up. Were you raised with a faith journey?
Thank you for asking. No. Well, yes and no. I mean, so my mother was raised Jewish and her parents were conservative. My father was raised Catholic and his parents were conservative or Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And my father's mother died when he was a teenager, and then unexpectedly of health complications. And then his father committed suicide shortly after. So I didn't know those grandparents in form. I did know the family though. And then my mother's side, she just has one brother, and it was a small family. So I didn't have a lot of familial interactions. I was mentioning before, the town that I was raised in was built by somebody named James Rouse, and he had a vision of all people of all races, all faiths, all nationalities that could live together harmoniously. And so I never attached myself to religions. I found them interesting. I explored a lot on my own. I studied about Buddhism, and I would go to my friends' churches. And so I was exposed to a lot of different belief systems, but I was raised in a place where there was no right one, and everyone was accepted. And that is absolutely divine. Like, that is something that I'm so grateful that my parents chose to raise me in this place where my neighbors were all different colors, and my, different accents. And my mother is a language teacher, and so she always did what are these exchange programs, and she's very cultured. And so I never was raised with a religion or any sort of strict guidelines. I was a free spirit all my life.
So then I don't know how to say this nicely. The good parts about religion to me are the spiritual parts.
Mm-hmm.
To me, dogma, religion is all based on fear of what will happen if you think for yourself. Because I was raised in a denomination that said we don't think for ourselves. It wasn't Catholic, but it was like Catholic, where anti-humanism was one of our stated values, right? Don't think for yourself, just do what we tell you. And the spirit part of that was missing it was probably there, but I missed it. And so the spirit piece that goes through all the religions or dogmas or whatever it is, I think is what you're describing in your free spiritedness. And so I think about people who don't have that, or haven't been exposed to that, or haven't had the opportunity to have a faith conversation or a spirit conversation. How would they possibly get through life in the way that you and I have, despite our toxicity or our traumas or whatever it might have been? I think about that sometimes, and I go, oh my gosh, no wonder they are struggling.
Well, there's 3 components to every human being, right? Or every being. There's the seed of the father that's in the womb of the mother. So to bring a human form into the world, you have to have the biological and physiological male and female, but then there's the creative spirit. There's all that is. that makes our blood pump and our hearts beat, and that's beyond, right? We can, so religion, philosophy, belief systems, these are all containers to help people understand where they came from. And for someone who doesn't care where they came from, I don't know how to comment on that right now because it's not important. But anybody listening or anybody that's going to engage in conversations with us has an innate knowing of who they are. Even if they don't understand it, they accept it. So whether or not they believe in God or spirit, that's immaterial. I recently had a friend, because I've been writing more faith-based things, or spiritual things, I should say. And I had made some comment to him on a message on Facebook, and he said, "I don't believe in God." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, I'm not going to continue the conversation. But he is not different from you and I.
Right.
He is a brilliant, loving, successful person. And just because he doesn't frame it as, he doesn't believe it, he frames it as he doesn't believe in God. That's cool. But he knows something is inside of him. He is love. And as far as I'm concerned, what is spirit? What is God? It's love, unconditional. And so a lot of times people are raised having fear around dogma, but they are not able to understand the difference between the dogma and the religion, right? And so they attach, this is bad, religion's bad, or God is bad, or whatever, even though inside they know, they feel the desire, the inspiration. And again, going back to language, right? A lot of people don't understand language. What is inspiration? It's in the spirit of, right? It's the action of. If we break the word inspiration, right? Inspirato, it's in the spirit of. So when we are inspired, we are acting as God. When we are in ego, when we are consumed by the physical and the conditions, we are acting as man, human, right? Man, short for human. A lot of times now people go, "Oh, man, woman," but it's again, it's just adding layer upon layer upon layer of stories that are based in hurt and fear. And so if we go broader and we say, well, let's take away all the details, that the devil is in the details. If we take away the details and we look at something, anything from a broader perspective, and we keep zooming out until we can see truth is evident everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about the people who you had to have influenced when you were a correctional officer, and having interacted with those people who were in a situation that I can't believe they would have chosen. I don't know how people end up there. I don't know.
Exactly. And I'm going to pause you there.
Yeah.
That's exactly the point. And if people could, rather than placing judgment, recognize, I could never make this decision. I don't know how they wound up there, and end the conversation. It would serve the world well. Because when you are born into an environment of violence, you learn how to adapt to the environment of violence. Babies are not born into this world as anything other than pure potential. And where we go and how we are raised and what we observe, we either can recognize, this feels good and I'm going to stick with it, or this does not feel good and I am going to release from it. But it is a lot easier said than done. So if we go back to the Holocaust and the SS soldiers, people would say, I could never do that. And a lot of people didn't do that. But you know where they did wind up? No longer on Earth, right? So it's very difficult to truly understand what one would do if faced with a decision that meant putting your own life before someone else's. And our first responders are faced with this every day. Everyone is faced with this every day to one degree or another, but we don't understand that it's all the same. Decisions are decisions are decisions, right? You also would not think, I'm going to drive like a maniac and like cause an accident. But the person driving like a maniac is not planning on causing accidents, right? So it's, again, just zooming out from any judgment to say, is this really necessary? Or how can I bring it back to myself? And how can I, what is it that I'm thinking about, this thing that's stressing me out, this situation that's stressing me out, or this observation that's stressing me out? What is it that I really want to understand in this? And then zoom out to bring it back to ourselves rather than the person or the situation we're putting the judgment on. I tell my mother all the time, turn off the effing news, because it conditions us to focus on that which we don't want. It conditions us to focus on that which whoever is benefiting from our fear wants us to experience. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I feel like is that helpful?
Well, it's helpful. That's not where I was going exactly, because I was thinking that the people who had the benefit of having you hold the space for them, who had ended up in a correctional facility for whatever reason for their lives, I would believe that they had the opportunity to touch something they wouldn't have had you not been there. So whatever
maybe
it was,
if they observed that, right? So I had a job to do and I did my job. So I would tell the guys, like, I am here to ensure health, safety, and welfare. That's it. If you want to have a conversation and you want to be appropriate with me, I'm happy to listen and reflect. But again, people are constantly interacting. Every single, I believe everybody is an angel on earth. We talk about spirit, we talk about source. And when you come into the world, there's no difference about this idea of angels. There's no difference between that and human beings. If you could understand that we all come in as spirit and we're all having a human experience. And so you never know who you are interacting with. You never know what they've walked. You never know. And so when most people are so busy ignoring the people around them, they're, tuned out, they're in their phones, they're in their own stuff, they're just rushing through life. Hold the door for strangers. Look people in their eye and say thank you. Use tellers' names when you're getting groceries. People are not used to experiencing this. So every single person has the potential to bless somebody else's life and to be impactful in a way that they never intended, just by virtue of seeing the other human being. And so it's, people that have been incarcerated for all sorts of different reasons. And people who have, everybody is alive. Nobody's perfect. Nobody is without fault, and so there absolutely were some people who I've worked with in my life who found benefit in working with me, but most don't, because I'm just another human being. We all go through life and we meet people along the way, and we never know what words we say or what actions we do that are going to influence or, cause a chain reaction in another person, good, bad, or indifferent.
Right. Yes. I think, and again, I have no proof of this. I just met you an hour ago, but the fact that you were ill when you were in that environment meant that you were open to the negative, because there's negative and positive. It's an energetic shift. And I would challenge you. I believe that there were inmates there that you touched in a positive way without knowing it or recognizing it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You saw them as humans who were in a situation that, through whatever reason, again, I go back to reasonableness. It's so hard to find reasons for things. And once in a while, it's good for me to remember that some things happen for a purpose beyond any reason I can come up with in my mind. And I have to allow that so that I don't judge it.
Yeah.
And so in the observation of things like that, it's fascinating to me to watch your path and say you left because you were ill. You went from that to another iteration of coaching you said you took on again because you had done that before. And it feels to me like when you just were talking about angels and you said the angels showed up around you to help you heal from a terminal illness or disease just recently, angels are human and not human, probably, right? Because angels can show up in human form.
Yeah. So I always would tell the guys, look, I am not a judge and I am not God. Those are not roles that I came into this world to play. So again, health, safety, and welfare. You want to sit and talk, you do what you need to do. You've got your free time. You want to spend your free time with me? That's cool. I'm here for it. Because yes, I see every human being non-judgmentally.
Yeah.
And if somebody is coming at me with conditions that don't feel good, I'm not here for that.
Right.
I'm here for peace. I'm here for love. And so if the other party meets me where I'm at, right, I'll extend myself to an extent, but they also have to extend themselves to an extent. And then from there, that's communion, that's community, whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, I have a kid that I was working with when he was 15 years old, and he, excuse me, he was adjudicated and he was in a program that I worked in. And, you know, he got out and he's now 36 and he's incarcerated again. But I've heard from him, you know, for these last 21 years. And no matter where I go, he always knows how to reach me. Right. And so like Facebook and all this technology that we want to hate on, there's so many wonderful applications that have allowed us to be connected in ways that we otherwise wouldn't.
Right.
So I've never questioned my value.
Right.
I've never gone through depression. I hear about things and I can hold space for people, but I've always known who I am. Have I always known my purpose? No, of course, that's evolved. But I've always been in my core who I am. And I have been judged for it, right? As we all are. People don't like you. They don't like the way you look. They don't like the way you sound. They don't like the way you smell. They don't like this. They don't like that. And as long as you're open to receiving that information, you're going to get it. And so working in the system, you know, I was getting ill and ill. Like the doctors couldn't figure out what's going on. And, you know, they diagnosed me with PTSD and like I was still getting ill and ill. And I had to say enough. I had to say, I've put myself in a situation. So it was New Year's Eve, 2013, turning into 2014. I worked an overnight shift. I've talked about this on a lot of podcasts, so I'm not going to bother going into it. But I worked an overnight shift that was hell. Like it was absolute hell. And that night, I experienced some things, and I said to my sergeant, I will not be here for another turn of the year. And then, you know, you forget the day, next day, keep on going. I wound up getting my real estate license and getting involved in real estate a bit, but I was doing that on the side while I was still working. And all of a sudden, it seemed, right? So time and space is an interesting thing. So all of a sudden, the schedule's coming out for Christmas of 2014. And I'm standing there and I go, oh my goodness, I promised myself I would not be here for another turn of the year. I historically have kept my promises to other people, but I have historically never kept my promises to myself. What am I going to do? And so that was a shit or get off the pot moment right there. That was a decision where I went, I cannot not keep this promise. And that was pivotal. And so I put in my notice and I thanked my superintendent for having such a horrific facility. I told her that if it was like the facility that I had come from, I probably would have stayed to retirement. So thank you, because it is so out of control and so dangerous and so unacceptable. I would rather flip burgers at McDonald's than spend any further time here. Well, they didn't care for my 2 weeks. They just let me go right away. But but I mean, that was truth, right? For me, that was truth. And so I put it in, and it was a Friday, I believe. And I was working the overnight. So I put it in, before 7 a.m. getting off. And I'm sure she would have gotten it whenever she came in. I went home and got a couple of hours of sleep before showing a room. In the off season, I had a number of vacation rentals, and in the off season, I was just renting the places out. And so I had a house that was empty, and I was showing it, and I went in there, and it was so cold, and like colder than it should have been. And so I turned up the heater, the furnace, and I was hearing click, click, click. And I'd hear it come on, fire up, and then go off. And so I showed the place, and then I was like, what's going on with this? It feels so cold. The furnace was done.
Yeah.
And so this was a Friday afternoon by this point, and it was in like winter conditions. And so I couldn't just ignore it. So I had to call for an emergency repair. They came out, took a look, said, look, by the time we repair this, it's going to cost more than putting in a new one. I had just quit my job, 12 hours ago, right? Not even. I knew there was like no more money going to be coming in. I didn't have something to go to. And the amount that it was going to cost for the furnace was just more than the amount that I had in the bank. What am I going to do? I mean, that's life. Yeah. And I remember standing there after the guy left. I remember standing there on the porch and just kind of laughing and going, all right, God, I got you. Let's see what's next. It's all good. It's all good, because no matter what comes my way, I know that I'm resilient, and I know that I live on purpose. And when I stop paying attention to that, that's when the dis-ease and the disharmony comes. That's when the problems arise. But when I am reminded that no matter what comes my way, as long as I have faith in knowing I've been here before, I've gotten through something. So I've always said like God's got my back, but I never attached any kind of like, I don't pray. I don't like, God hasn't been a central figure for me, but it's just the knowingness that I have overcome everything in my life. I have accomplished everything that I have in my life. So there's no question to me, no matter what comes my way, I know I can get through it, or I'll die. Like, that's it. Yeah. And so I'm not afraid of death. I've never been afraid of death. I've never been afraid of life. I love life, and I'm happy to live, and I've never not wanted to live. However, I've never been so attached to being alive that I've feared death. I don't know if that makes any sense or is helpful.
That is helpful. And I think that reminds me, as I'm looking over here at your bio, that you are an essayist. You are working on self-publishing your first book. Well, this was expecting it to be available on Amazon in early October 2023, which is coming right up. How is it going?
Do you know, the biggest challenge is just figuring out what to put in and what to leave out. And that's what it is. So I've been writing for a long time. I think in essays, I think in poems, and I never realized that was weird until the last few years. It's like, oh, okay, well, we talked before recording about titles. And labels and titles, I feel, are always the lowest vibration. So I didn't go to university. I was a high school dropout. I got through life. I wound up going back as an adult and getting my holistic healthcare degree. But like, I didn't follow a path that was laid out for me. I just went, I just lived. And so it always is challenging to communicate with people who've known me in different iterations of my life. And at one point I go, oh, philosopher. I guess that's the word that I can attach that to. I'm a philosopher. So, or an artist, or, so yeah, I write, I express however I express. So the biggest challenge with publishing the book is that I don't want to be contained. And so finding the way to create something tangible that people can look at and use for themselves, not Nicole's voice. Nicole does not matter. It's what comes out. How does it serve the person who's reading it, and what perceptions are they having? And so that's the challenge right now, but I'm committed to getting it done. So
It's funny. I've written several books, and that's always been a challenge. When is it done? How do you know when it's done? I now started painting not that long ago, so I'm painting, and I never quite know when paintings are done. And so there comes a point at which that one's done.
yeah,
And
the
then we go
bison, right?
on. The bison, yeah.
Yeah, I was enjoying your bison.
This is my little new little bison guy.
Oh, so sweet, so realistic too. Like
And
looking at him.
so that process will, if I can give you any advice from this side of it, it'll be done when it's done, and then you'll be on to the next thing, whatever the next thing is, whether it's a continuation of what you've just written. There will be a time at which you'll just know. And
Well, it's Earth Angel Academy. Earth
yeah,
Angel
there you go.
Academy is what I'm creating. It's
I love
just,
it.
again, I was already in the space, and then I disconnected and released everything because I wanted to make sure there was nothing undone before I left this earth, and I didn't want anybody to have to clean up my mess. So now it's just a matter of going, okay, well, what do I want to play in? So Earth Angel Academy is something that's just going to be a membership through my Substack. So anybody who does a paid subscription on Substack, earthseekerswelcome.com, they'll get the lessons and everything, and get to ask me questions and hear me continue to go on about all this really deep, big stuff.
But there will be people. I mean, there is an audience for everything, and it's just a matter of connecting. The people who are looking and the people who are being sought they have to come together. I have to believe that myself, because it's what we're up to. So
And
there.
this is the you doing this production is just such a gift to everyone, to me, to you, but also to everybody who listens. And it's like podcasts and new media in general, it's fascinating, and it's so phenomenal right now. I don't know, unless things have changed, the Screen Actors Guild went on strike. I believe they're still
on strike. Yep.
And this is a time where the creator economy, they call it, but independent creators have voice and are able to share a message, and people are looking for that. They're looking for that hope. They're looking to attach to something that resonates and is not bringing them down further than although there's a lot of that. There are a lot of people who really want to be down, and there is plenty of content out there for them. But I have been finding that there's actually, in the mainstream and in new media, there's more and more conscious comedy, conscious drama, really creatives who are coming together and putting things out that uplift humanity.
Yeah.
And such a gift. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you. And thank Phil for connecting us.
Indeed.
So you've got a lot of links that I will put in the show notes. You've got your private session bookings, your website, your blog, growthseekerswelcome.com, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'll make sure that people have access to you however they seek to find you. And
thank you.
This has been a pleasure, Nicole, and absolutely no need to apologize for going deep. That's what we do on Get Real. And I look forward to following you and just keeping in touch.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And as always, everybody, go get real. Talk to you again. Bye.